Rain pounded against the greenhouse windows as Raven Mitchell carefully tended to her experimental moss samples. The isolation of her research station in the Olympic Peninsula suited her perfectly, just her plants, and the constant symphony of the Pacific Northwest rainfall. 10 years of studying rare botanical specimens had taught her that the best discoveries often came in solitude. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the dense forest surrounding her small compound. Something about tonight felt different, charged with an energy that made her skin prickle. As she recorded her observations in her weather-worn journal, a flash of light caught her attention, but this wasn't lightning. It was steady, pulsing, and distinctly purple. Raven set down her pen, watching as the light descended through the storm clouds. Her scientific mind immediately began cataloging details, too slow for a meteor, too controlled for space debris. The light disappeared behind the tree-line, followed by a deep rumble that shook the ground beneath her feet. She shouldn't investigate. Every horror movie she'd ever seen screamed against it. But curiosity had always been her weakness, and something about that light called to her. Grabbing her rain gear and emergency kit, Raven stepped out into the storm. The forest was treacherous in the dark, but Raven knew these paths well. She followed the lingering glow, pushing through wet ferns and navigating around fallen logs. The air grew warmer as she approached, heavy with an unfamiliar scent like ozone and summer flowers. In a small clearing, she found it, a sleek vessel half buried in the soft earth, its surface shimmering with iridescent patterns. Steam rose where raindrops hit the hull, creating a ghostly haze around the crash site. Raven approached cautiously, her heart pounding against her ribs. A panel in the side of the vessel shifted, releasing a hiss of pressurized air. Raven stumbled backward, nearly losing her footing on the wet ground. A figure emerged from the opening, humanoid but clearly not human. Her skin was pale violet, marked with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed with her labored breathing. She looked at Raven with eyes like captured galaxies, filled with stars and swirling nebulae. "Help," the alien whispered, the word somehow perfect in English despite her otherworldly appearance. Then she collapsed, her patterns dimming dangerously. Raven's training kicked in. Alien or not, someone needed medical attention. She rushed forward, checking vital signs as best she could on a being she knew nothing about. The alien's skin was cool to the touch, and while Raven could detect a pulse, it was erratic. "I've got you," Raven murmured, carefully supporting the alien's weight. "I'm going to help you, but you'll have to trust me." The journey back to her station was arduous. The alien, though slender, was heavier than she looked, and the storm seemed to intensify with every step. By the time they reached the greenhouse, both were soaked to the bone. Raven cleared her work table, laying the alien down gently. Under the bright lights, she could see the extent of her injuries, burns along one side, what appeared to be cuts or lacerations on her arms, and a deep gash across her abdomen that leaked silvery fluid. "What am I supposed to do?" Raven whispered to herself, running through her medical supplies. Everything she knew about trauma care was based on human physiology. Would antiseptics help or harm an alien metabolism? Could bandages contain whatever that silver substance was? The alien's eyes fluttered open, those cosmic irises focusing on Raven's face. "Nix," she said softly, touching her chest. "I am Nix." "Nix," Raven repeated, the name feeling strange on her tongue. "I'm Raven. You're hurt, but I want to help. Can you tell me what you need?" Nix's hand moved to a small pouch at her waist, withdrawing what looked like a crystal vial filled with luminescent liquid. "Water," she managed to say, "mix with water." Raven grabbed a sterile beaker, filling it with distilled water. Nix's trembling fingers uncapped the vial, letting 3 drops of the glowing substance fall into the water. The mixture began to shine with an inner light, swirling with colors Raven had never seen before. "Drink," Nix instructed, her voice growing weaker. Raven helped her sit up slightly, supporting her head as she sipped the glowing liquid. The effect was immediate, the bioluminescent patterns on Nyx's skin brightened, and her breathing became more regular. The silver fluid seeping from her wounds began to congeal, forming a protective barrier. As Nyx drifted into what Raven hoped was healing sleep, the botanist sat back in her chair, staring at her unexpected patient. In a single night, her quiet world of research and solitude had been completely upended. She had an alien sleeping on her work table, a crashed spacecraft in the forest, and absolutely no idea what would happen when the sun rose. But as she watched Nyx's chest rise and fall, marked by those fascinating patterns of light, Raven knew one thing for certain: her life would never be the same again. Whatever had brought Nyx to Earth, whatever she was running from or searching for, Raven was now part of it. And somehow, that thought didn't frighten her as much as it should. Dawn crept through the greenhouse windows, casting prism-like reflections off Nyx's iridescent skin. Raven hadn't slept, too focused on monitoring her unusual patient and documenting every detail she could observe. The alien's wounds had nearly healed, leaving behind faint patterns that shimmered like mother-of-pearl. Nyx stirred, her galaxy eyes opening slowly to take in her surroundings. She sat up with fluid grace, touching the healed tissue on her abdomen with evident relief. "You stayed," she said, her voice clearer now, though it carried an otherworldly resonance that made Raven's ears tingle. "Of course I stayed," Raven replied, offering a cup of water. "I couldn't exactly leave you alone. How are you feeling?" "Better. Your atmosphere is different from home. Heavier." But the healing solution worked well. Nyx swung her legs over the side of the table, her movements cautious but steady. "I owe you my life, Raven Mitchell." Raven blinked. "I never told you my full name." A small smile touched Nyx's lips. "Your species broadcasts thoughts quite loudly, especially when worried. It's not mind-reading, exactly, more like catching echoes of strong emotions." "That's..." Raven paused, processing this new information. "Actually fascinating from a neurological perspective. Does it work both ways? Can you share thoughts with me?" Curious, even in the face of the impossible, Nyx observed. "You remind me of our scholars back home." Her expression darkened. "Before everything changed." Raven pulled up a chair, her scientific curiosity warring with genuine concern for her patient. "What happened? Why did you crash here?" Nyx was quiet for a long moment, her bioluminescent patterns shifting to deeper, more somber hues. "My world, Luminera, was once a beacon of knowledge and discovery. We had achieved harmony between technology and nature, developed ways to heal entire ecosystems, even learned to fold space itself." She touched the empty crystal vial at her waist. "But power attracts those who would misuse it. A faction rose within our society, the Void Seekers. They believed our gifts should be used for dominance, not harmony. They wanted to weaponize our discoveries, turn healing into harm, peace into war." Nyx's patterns flared with what Raven interpreted as anger or grief. "When we refused, they turned violent. Those who could escape scattered across the galaxy, taking with us what we could save of our knowledge. I carried something precious, something the Void Seekers want desperately." She met Raven's eyes. "They followed me here. The crash wasn't an accident, they damaged my ship's navigation systems. But I managed to hide what I was protecting before they could track its energy signature." Raven leaned forward. "What did you hide? Where is it?" "Safe, for now. But they won't stop looking." Nyx stood, moving to the window to gaze at the forest. "I need to recover it and find a way off this planet before they trace my location. I can't let them have it, Raven. The consequences would be catastrophic not just for your world, but for every world." "Let me help," Raven said without hesitation. "I know these forests better than anyone. Whatever you're protecting, we can find it together." Nyx turned back to her, those stellar eyes searching Raven's face. You don't understand the danger. The Void Seekers, they destroy everything in their path. If they find you helping me. I made my choice when I brought you in from the storm, Raven said firmly. Besides, I'm not exactly helpless. I've developed some interesting applications for my botanical research. Things that might surprise even an advanced alien civilization. A genuine smile spread across Nyx's face, her patterns brightening to a warm golden hue. Perhaps the universe guided me to crash here after all. She reached out, taking Raven's hand. Her touch sent a gentle vibration through Raven's arm, like standing too close to a bass speaker. Very well. But first, I must show you something. Nyx pressed her other hand to Raven's forehead. Suddenly, the greenhouse disappeared. Raven found herself floating in space, surrounded by stars and swirling nebulae. She saw a beautiful world of crystal spires and floating gardens, watched as darkness spread across its surface, witnessed ships fleeing into the void. The vision was overwhelming, filled with emotions that weren't her own: hope, fear, determination, and something deeper, something that felt like destiny. When her vision cleared, Raven was back in her greenhouse, gasping for breath. Nyx steadied her, concern evident in her expression. I'm sorry. I should have warned you. But you needed to understand what we're facing. Raven took a deep breath, her mind racing with the implications of what she'd seen. Those ships in your vision, they'll be coming here, won't they? Nyx nodded grimly. Yes. And when they do, they'll bring destruction unlike anything your world has ever seen. Unless we can stop them. Then we'd better get to work, Raven said, moving to her research station. Tell me everything you know about these Void Seekers. Their weaknesses, their technology, anything that might give us an advantage. As Nyx began to explain, Raven's hands flew across her keyboard, documenting everything. The sun climbed higher in the sky, but neither woman noticed. They were too focused on the task ahead, finding Nyx's hidden treasure and preparing for a battle that would determine the fate of not just their lives, but countless others across the stars. The pre-dawn forest was alive with sound as Raven and Nyx made their way through the undergrowth. 3 days had passed since the crash, and Nyx had finally recovered enough strength to lead them to her hidden treasure. Her bioluminescent patterns glowed softly in the darkness, casting strange shadows among the trees. It's close, Nyx whispered, her galaxy eyes scanning the canopy above. I can feel its resonance growing stronger. Raven followed closely, carrying a backpack filled with supplies and some of her experimental plant compounds. The past few days had been spent preparing for this moment, combining Nyx's knowledge with Raven's botanical expertise to create defensive measures against potential threats. They reached a massive cedar tree, its trunk wider than any Raven had seen before. Nyx placed her hand against the bark, and her patterns pulsed with increased intensity. Here. The tree's bioelectric field helped mask the crystal's energy signature. Reaching into a hollow near the roots, Nyx withdrew a small object wrapped in what looked like living metal. The wrapping peeled away at her touch, revealing a crystal unlike anything Raven had ever seen. It seemed to contain its own light source, shifting colors rippling through its faceted surface like the aurora borealis. The heart of Luminera, Nyx said reverently. Our greatest achievement, and potentially our greatest mistake. Raven stared at the crystal, mesmerized by its ever-changing colors. What exactly is it? It's a quantum consciousness matrix, Nyx explained, holding the crystal carefully. It can store and process information at levels your most advanced computers couldn't begin to approach. But more than that, it can interface directly with organic matter, healing, enhancing, even restructuring at the molecular level. She turned to Raven, her expression grave. Imagine being able to cure any disease, repair any injury, even reverse environmental damage on a global scale. That's what this crystal was designed for. But in the wrong hands, it could also be used to create devastating weapons, control minds, or tear apart the very fabric of reality. A twig snapped in the distance, and both women froze. Nyx's patterns dimmed instantly, and Raven held her breath, listening intently. After a moment of tense silence, a deer emerged from the underbrush, regarded them briefly, and disappeared into the shadows. "We should keep moving," Raven whispered. "The sun will be up soon." But as they turned to leave, Nyx suddenly stumbled, the crystal slipping from her grasp. Raven lunged forward, catching it before it could hit the ground. The moment her fingers touched its surface, the world exploded into light. Images and sensations flooded her mind, ancient forests on distant worlds, cities that sang with crystalline harmonies, the joy of healing and growth and renewal. But there was darkness too, the Void Seekers' corruption spreading like oil on water, the desperate flight of the survivors, the weight of responsibility crushing down like a mountain. "Raven!" Nyx's voice cut through the vision, and Raven found herself on her knees, still clutching the crystal. Her whole body tingled with residual energy. "I'm okay," she gasped, though she wasn't entirely sure that was true. Is that what you feel all the time?" Nyx helped her to her feet, her touch gentle but urgent. "The crystal responds to organic life. It's trying to communicate, to show you what's at stake. But we need to move." That surge of energy, however brief, might have been detected. As if confirming her fears, a low hum began to fill the air. Raven looked up through the trees to see lights moving across the sky, not stars, not planes, but something else entirely. "They're here," Nyx breathed, her patterns shifting to alarmed crimsons and purples. "The Void Seekers scout ships. We have less time than I thought." Raven quickly secured the crystal in her backpack, her mind racing. "My research station has a basement laboratory. It's shielded for conducting sensitive experiments, might help mask the crystal's energy signature. It won't hold them for long, but it's better than staying exposed." Nyx took Raven's hand, her grip firm. "Raven, listen to me. If anything happens, if we get separated, you must protect the crystal. The knowledge it contains, the power it holds, it must never fall into their hands." "Nothing's going to happen," Raven insisted, though her heart was pounding. "We're in this together now. Come on, I know a faster way back." They moved through the forest as quickly as they dared, while above them, more lights appeared in the sky. The hunt had begun, and Earth's fate now rested in the balance. The crystal in Raven's backpack pulsed with steady warmth, like a heartbeat, reminding her with each step of the impossible responsibility she had inherited. As they ran, Raven couldn't help but think about the visions she'd seen. The crystal wasn't just a weapon or a tool, it was hope, pure and crystallized, hope for healing and growth and understanding. She might not have asked for this burden, but now that she understood what was at stake, she would defend it with everything she had. The sun began to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, but the beautiful dawn brought no comfort. Somewhere up there, the Void Seekers were preparing their next move, and time was running out. The basement laboratory hummed with energy as Raven rushed to set up her equipment. She had converted her botanical research stations into makeshift defensive positions, incorporating Nyx's knowledge with her own experimental compounds. The crystal sat in a modified containment unit, its glow muted but steady. "They're getting closer," Nyx said from her position by the small window. Her patterns had shifted to deep blues and violets, reflecting her tension. "I can sense their search patterns tightening." Raven checked the seals on several pressurized canisters containing her latest creation, a fast-growing vine species enhanced with Nyx's biochemical insights. "How many are we dealing with?" "At least 3 scout ships, probably a dozen hunters." Nyx's galaxy eyes narrowed. "Led by Commander Thorn. I recognize his energy signature." The name sent a visible shudder through Nyx's form, her patterns flickering like a disturbed pond. Raven paused in her work, studying her friend's reaction. You know him? He was once our greatest healer, Nyx said softly. Before the corruption took him. Now he uses his knowledge to destroy rather than restore. He's the one who. She touched a faint scar on her neck, barely visible beneath her luminescent patterns. A deep boom overhead cut off any further explanation. Dust filtered down from the ceiling as something massive passed over the research station. Raven's computer screens flickered with interference. They're landing, Nyx warned, moving away from the window. Raven, there's something you need to know before dash. The ceiling shook again, harder this time. A voice echoed through the building, amplified and distorted. Nyx, dear sister. Did you really think you could hide from me forever? Raven turned to Nyx, shock evident on her face. Sister? Half-sister, Nyx corrected, pain evident in her voice. We shared the same mentor, learned the same healing arts. But Thorn was always hungry for more power, more control. When he joined the Void Seekers, he tried to force me to go with him. Heavy footsteps sounded above them, accompanied by the whine of energy weapons powering up. Raven grabbed her backpack, filled with backup supplies and emergency equipment. We need to move. There's a tunnel system under the lab, part of an old mining operation. We can dash. The basement door exploded inward in a shower of splinters and metal. Through the smoke stepped a figure that made Raven's breath catch. He looked similar to Nyx in basic form, but where her patterns spoke of life and healing, his pulsed with sickly greens and blacks. His eyes weren't filled with stars but with swirling darkness. The crystal, sister, Thorn said, his voice carrying the same resonant quality as Nyx's but twisted, discordant. Give it to me, and I'll make your end quick. You know we'll find it eventually. You'll destroy everything we worked for, Nyx replied, stepping forward to shield Raven. Everything our people believed in. I'll perfect it. Thorn snarled. Your precious crystal was meant for more than healing minor wounds and growing pretty gardens. With its power, we could reshape entire worlds, turn every species into exactly what we want them to be. More Void Seekers filed into the room, their armor decorated with the same corrupt patterns as Thorn's skin. They carried weapons that looked like they were grown rather than built, organic technology twisted to destructive purposes. Raven's hand found one of her pressurized canisters. She caught Nyx's eye and gave a subtle nod. They had planned for this, prepared for it. They just had to time it right. The crystal shows us what we truly are, Nyx said, her patterns brightening with determination. That's why it rejected you, brother. Your heart is as void as your name. Thorn's face contorted with rage. He raised his weapon, its barrel pulsing with dark energy. Then you'll die clinging to your weak ideals. Both of you. Now! Raven shouted, throwing the canister at the group of Void Seekers. Nyx raised her hands, her patterns flaring with brilliant light. The canister exploded in a cloud of spores and liquid, and Raven's enhanced vines erupted from the mixture, growing at impossible speeds. The Void Seekers fired, but the plants moved with unnatural intelligence, weaving themselves into shields and barriers. Thorn's shot went wide, melting a section of wall into slag. The tunnel. Raven grabbed Nyx's arm, pulling her toward a hidden panel in the floor. Behind them, Thorn's enraged scream was muffled by the sound of thrashing vines and energy weapons. They dropped into the darkness of the tunnel, Nyx's patterns providing just enough light to see by. The crystal pulsed in Raven's backpack, responding to the chaos above. He won't stop, Nyx said as they ran. Not until he has the crystal or we're dead. Then we'll have to make sure neither of those things happens, Raven replied grimly. I have an idea, but you're not going to like it. Behind them, Thorn's voice echoed through the tunnel. You can't run forever, sister. The crystal belongs to those strong enough to use it. Raven and Nyx pressed on into the darkness, but both knew this was just the beginning of the real battle. The time for running was almost over. Soon, they would have to make their stand, and the outcome would determine not just their fate, but the fate of two worlds. The old mining tunnel opened into a vast underground cavern, its walls glittering with quartz deposits that caught and reflected Nyx's bioluminescence. Raven led them to a natural stone platform overlooking an underground river, her breathing heavy but controlled. "We make our stand here," she said, shrugging off her backpack. "No more running." Nyx's patterns shifted with concern as she watched Raven begin unpacking equipment. "Your plan, you intend to use the crystal, don't you?" "Not exactly." Raven pulled out several vials of her experimental compounds, along with the crystal itself. "I want to combine our knowledge. Your healing technology, my understanding of Earth's biology, and the crystal's power. Create something neither healing nor destruction, but transformation." The sound of pursuit echoed through the tunnel behind them. Thorn's voice carried on the damp air, "I can sense the crystal's energy growing stronger. You're only delaying the inevitable." Raven worked quickly, mixing compounds while Nyx stood guard. "The crystal responds to life itself, right? Shows us what we truly are." She looked up at her alien friend. "Then let's show them exactly what humanity and Luminara can accomplish together." Nyx's eyes widened as she understood. The resonance between species, it could work. But Raven, channeling that much energy, it could kill you. Better that than letting them use it as a weapon. Raven's hands moved steadily despite her fear. "Besides, I trust you. Trust us." The first of the Void Seekers emerged from the tunnel, their corrupt patterns casting sickly shadows. Thorn strode at their head, his darkness-filled eyes fixing on the crystal in Raven's hands. "How touching," he sneered. "The primitive thinks she can wield our technology. Sister, you've fallen so far, putting your faith in these lesser beings." "The only one who fell was you, Thorn," Nyx replied, her patterns blazing with defiance. "You forgot the most fundamental truth of our people, that all life is connected, all life has value." "Pretty words that mean nothing," Thorn raised his weapon. "The crystal will show everyone the truth, that power is the only law that matters." Raven stood, holding the crystal in one hand and a vial of her compound in the other. "You're right about one thing, the crystal will show the truth." Before Thorn could fire, she poured the compound over the crystal. It began to glow with unprecedented intensity, responding to the mixture of Earth biology and Luminaran science. Raven gasped as energy surged through her body, but Nyx was there instantly, supporting her, their hands joined around the crystal. The cavern filled with light as the crystal's power expanded outward. Where it touched the Void Seekers, their corrupted patterns began to shift and change. Thorn screamed, but not in pain, in shock, as the darkness in his eyes began to clear. "What you feel," Raven managed to say through gritted teeth, "is life itself. Not as a weapon, not as a tool, but as it truly is. Connected. Whole. Beautiful." The crystal's energy continued to pulse, and with each wave, the Void Seekers' corrupted patterns transformed. Colors of healing and growth replaced the sickly hues of destruction. Even Thorn fell to his knees, his patterns slowly returning to their original luminescence. I remember," he whispered, staring at his hands as they began to glow with healthy light. "I remember what we were meant to be." The power building in the crystal reached a crescendo. Raven felt her consciousness expanding, touching every life form in the cavern, in the forest above, reaching outward to the stars themselves. Nyx's presence anchored her, kept her from losing herself in the vast web of connection. With a final surge of energy, the crystal released its power in a blast of pure light. When it faded, Raven found herself still standing, supported by Nyx, while around them, the transformed Void Seekers looked on in wonder. Thorn approached slowly, his patterns now pulsing with familiar stars. "Sister," he said softly to Nyx, "I was so lost. Can you ever forgive me?" "Forgiveness is part of healing," Nyx replied, though she didn't let go of Raven. But trust must be earned again. The crystal in their hands had changed, becoming something new, neither purely Luminaran nor purely earthborn, but a perfect fusion of both. Its light pulsed in harmony with the quartz in the cavern walls, with the river below, with the forest above, with every heartbeat in the room. What happens now? Raven asked, still dizzy from the energy surge. Nyx smiled, her patterns glowing with joy and hope. Now we rebuild. Not just my world or yours, but something greater. A bridge between stars, between peoples. She looked at Raven with those galaxy eyes. That is, if you're willing to help. Raven thought about her quiet life before, her solitary research, her small world. Then she thought about the vastness she had touched through the crystal, the endless possibilities that lay ahead. Well, she said with a smile, my greenhouse could use some expansion. Above them, dawn was breaking over the forest. But this sunrise felt different. It was the dawn of something new, something wonderful and terrible and beautiful all at once. As they made their way back to the surface, Raven realized that while she had indeed freed an alien woman, the real gift hadn't been the crystal at all. The real gift had been the chance to be part of something greater than herself, to help heal not just one world, but many. And as she walked beside Nyx, their hands still joined, the crystal pulsing between them like a shared heartbeat, Raven knew that this was just the beginning of their story.